Hej alla och hjärtligt välkomna till H603. Och jag befinner mig mitt i kalla skogen här. Lite blött, men just nu är det uppehåll så jag tänkte jag skulle passa på innan regnet börjar igen att fortsätta lite grann på det inslagna spåret. Och jag tänkte träna lite grann vidare på engelskan här. Det har ju börjat kännas mer och mer hemmastat med engelskan. Men jag vill också veta, jag känner inte till alla som tittar på det här om det är okej med engelska. Vi har ju några prenumeranter som inte riktigt känner till, men i så fall får ni höra av er. Men jag gör ett försök till och skulle det vara några invändningar så gör jag en engelsk. Men jag har börjat kalla de här 600-serien för Fyrhusets föreläsningar. Och med fyrhus menar jag fyren som vägleder dem som är ute på havet och har så att säga tagit sig vilse. Hittar inte vägen tillbaka och för varje steg de tar så kommer de sig längre och längre ifrån. Sådant som fungerar och är vettigt. Och en av de viktigaste sakerna är att tala om, ge egenskaperna för torra land. För att de som är till havs, de har sedan länge, åratal, decennier har gjort att de har glömt känslan av verklighet. Smaken av verklig mat, sensationen av en riktig upplevelse. Fylligheten att vara närvarande och förmågan att lära, veta och förstå. Det handlar både om uppmuntran och vägledande indikationer. Och med det kan det vara bra att måla upp en bild av vad innebär egentligen den kvantfysiska världen. Så jag vänder åter till engelskan och introduce everybody to episode 603 of the H lectures. And today I will begin a new series, started already before, and it's the Lighthouse lectures, part of the ambigram canon. And today I would like to give certain indications. What is the light in the lighthouse? What is the good stuff to guide people to? Because most of us have been to sea so long, lost on sea, that we lost all feeling of what the ground should be and what is a living experience. And what is it to feel food on your tongue, to perceive with your ears, to smell and to be alive. For a very, very long time, life has left the veins and we forgot about land and we are still lost at sea and getting used to the very, very small box, the very small living area that we find out to sea. Nowhere to walk, nowhere to breathe, nowhere to be. It's just habit and the complete implausibility that it could be any other way that keeps us there. So the first trait of the quantum physical world is that you feel at home. And this is this genuine feeling of homeliness that Heidegger meant with his homeliness in Heimlichkeit. Or you're also at home with yourself. You will have a stronger sense of being just you. You will have more confidence in your own being and personality. You'll be prouder and more grounded. You will have balance, because classical physics rids us of balance, but quantum physics takes us back to direction, to groundedness. We can once more feel the ground under our feet and feel that it supports us. We all in classical physics, we stand literally on our toes. We lost the feeling that the ground is actually supporting us. And therefore modern man always tenses himself to keep up a very fragile construction that is as actually dependent of the being ground under the feet, not moving seawater. This new sense of balance will make you think of the future in a more anticipating mode. You will genuinely, with all your heart and all your might, look forward to jobs, projects, meetings, doings. And you will also know in a much surer way, in an embodied way, that everything is going to work. And you will know this in an implicit way by having done it before. It's going to be in your body, material, tangible, real. And you will start to have a confidence that comes from the body. And the body will be the centering point. There's no possibility of sureness, balance without the body. But there will always be balance with the body. And the second being, you'll have in the quantum physical world an embodied implicit knowledge of the workings of the world. You will have access to loads of knowledge that will help you in your life, with your thinking, with your intentions, planning, but also with your past. And you will not have to work with only different, contradicting, implicitly taken percepts, but you will be rid by contradiction, and you will not have to endure or support a constant change of direction, which is so stereotypically the modern man, constantly changing his direction. Without a lighthouse, without the guiding light, there will always be a change in direction. And this embodied surer knowledge comes from practical experience in time and space. When you once more is connected to time and space, you will be able to take in, to digest the knowledge that comes from the constantly different, interesting, fractal-like reality. And this knowledge will be sure. It will not change every now and then like the weather forecast, which is a very good metaphor for the instance. And I think it's exceptionally fitting because it's just changing weather now. And modern life is like that. Reading the news, hearing some new facts. How many times doesn't it change? One year you should eat crisps, the other way you shouldn't. That food is not good this year, next year it will be good. Do this. The constant, explicit, differentiated, not very valid advice from all over the world doesn't suffice as a guiding light. It is rather confusing. And they have the idea of calling this information. You need something deeper, something more embodied, something implicit. And in the explicit take, just one explicit sort of, say, photograph, when I, in this instant, take something to be true in this instance. Wasn't true yesterday, and it will not be true tomorrow. But I have to be happy with the little knowledge I get right now, in this now, where I am now, 1:45. And this cutting up of the knowledge that we obscure reality by dividing it unaware into subject and object. Something that puts the subject into the distance. We can no longer go from the inside. It's covered, it's darkened, just like with Plato, who knew nothing of his inside. Everything was turned what he believed to be the outside, but thereby also dimming out the outside from experience. We also do the same with now and then. Then is not in view, it's far away, not perceptible, it's only the now. And I have to make do with only the now. We could call this knowledge instant coffee. A coffee that only has an instantaneous resemblance of real coffee. And if you put instant coffee in the microwave, you will almost go back in time. It's not even the same coffee beans in instant coffee like in ordinary coffee. It bears little, if any, resemblance to coffee. And I think the idea is very, very accurate, like metaphor. One of the better brands, I think it's called Nescafe Gold, something like that. I noticed it contained something in 1%, and that was actually grounded real coffee. 99% other stuff and a mere 1% real coffee. That is an extraordinary good metaphor for living in classical physics. It's 1% reality and the rest is made up by other stuff, unknown stuff. Hardly resembling proper coffee. It wasn't even proper coffee from the beginning, but it's been put in a process where everything real has been removed by chemical dire processes, removing every stain of reality, and you get something completely different from a proper cup of coffee. And the only reason people still enjoy that coffee is because they cannot feel it anymore. They are somewhere else. And we also make a division between inside and outside. Inside is the psyche, the mental. Outside is something completely different. And when we die, the inside disappears, and still the outside is there, fresh, but still very stained. This division makes half of the reality go away directly, but we will not be able to keep the outside, because the wholeness that was before cannot be divided. We take away from both of them. So the 1% rule, I think it's pretty good. The comparison between Nescafe and ordinary cafe goes for the difference between quantum physics and classical physics. Yes, sure enough, classical physics has a remnants, like a stain or a trace of proper coffee. But sure enough, it looks black, and it could be warm, but it's not real coffee. 99% not real coffee. For modern man, every new day when you wake up, open your eyes, there is a new direction. There's no will, there's new will, there's a new opinion. You went into the opinionated supermarket to buy yourself a new opinion. You keep it for one day or even less. A new take on life, a new direction, a new interest. We are indeed in classical physics uncertain. We are a little bit like a flag flying by the changing winds. in all direction at once, and therefore there's no direction at all, because that's exactly what all direction at once means that there's no direction. And similarly, we have all opinions, and thus not a single one. And we are also desperately trying to comply with all opinions, customs, conventions, etiquette. There's another take on this. And we try to make necessary adjustments to the outside, what we perceive to be completely outside. And then we lose sense of ourselves, like Maslow mentioned. We lack connection to our inner ego because there is a contradiction. Being in the world with other people, you have to be one way, and therefore you have to give up what's inside. Our ego, who we are. And the logic of KLF, classical physics, does not let us combine inside and outside because of the laws of contradiction. And let me just tell you about this before I start with the third aspect. The third part is that the law of contradiction is not usually, except for in logic, it's sometimes something outspoken, something defined. It's below the surface, doing its job. And we need to understand this is an implicit embodied principle, which makes it not merely sufficient to change our opinions about logic. We need to implicitly change, bodily change, to have a more encompassing logic, or to change the logic in any way. For the third part, I go into the law of excluded middle. This is what makes it impossible for us to be both with others, the society, our friends and family, and at the same time be ourselves. From the inside, with our needs, wants, personality, and inner strivings. The law of excluded middle dictates that we only can be one of the two sides. So LEM, the law of the excluded middle, is beforehand, before everything else happening, a priori limiting the possibilities. They are all already out of view. And in parentheses I might add this: when the law of the excluded middle was formulated, it was already in action and had been in action for centuries, without a doubt, because that is something embodied, implicit. It draws from something that is felt, real. But still, it limits the possibility. It leaves only two choices. Either we have to live a Kafkaesque existence, that we are completely ruled by the outside world, the customs, the laws, the rules, and everything else. Something that Kafka himself believed, and so wittingly wrote about. Or we have to move to an insulated island and spend our lives like a bum or a hippie or an alcoholic to be ourselves. And we all know by heart that there are no other alternatives. Either you conform to the outside and you give up yourself, or you take lead of yourself and give up everyone else. All of society, all the joy that can come from other people, creativity, thinking, laughing, enjoying, being with others, being a part of something. It becomes a choice. And this is what we know, and we all have known this until the advent of quantum physics. This is the first time that it's materially shown that certain opposites can exist simultaneously. This is the first time in world history, and this is what makes quantum physics so important. And I think many people intuit this. They know it by heart. Something has happened. We know it somewhere. But it needs to be embodied as well. I spoke about this with Gary Zukav. I had the opportunity to meet him in the late 90s when he was promoting his book in Gothenburg. And I met him at, I think it's called Molins Gymnasium near Victor Rydbergsgatan. But I did get the feeling, for him it was something explicit. He had changed his mind about logic, but it didn't mean a change in his bodily customs, in his incorporeal, material thing. Actually, he more or less denied the materiality of reality. And then he has He chose the isolated island as also sort of isolation to disregard the material. What we should do and what we can do, and the big opportunity is to resolve this problem and still have working contradictions. This has been shown by Graham Priest in paraconsistent logic, something that sprung out of quantum physics. And it will be even better. I think that is an extraordinary point from Graham Priest. We will have better contradictions. Contradictions that are actually, in another way, much more embodied and absolute. And the message about contradictions not being complementary or reconcilable is possibly as great as the insight that some can actually be complementary. Because there is a definite problem with classical physics, because it sort of indicates that contradictions just divide things, but they're not absolute. Because time can be bidirectional, can go backwards in classical physics. Space can always be turned back Walk 100 meters to the north, then you turn 100 meters south and you're back in the same spot. You're never back in the same spot. Not according to quantum physics. Something I just realized more or less recently. A couple of years ago, I believed still that you could go back to the same spot. Time and space are not unidirectional or unilaterally symmetrical in that way. And it's even like this, that the message from Graham Priest and paraconsistent logic is that thinking nothing in the world, we can't even think about bidirectional. What we do is stop thinking. Number 4 is an equally decisive message from quantum physics, and this is also something that made paraconsistent logic possible, is that not all contradictions dissolves. We have actual things that does not dissolve into each other. Not like when you mix hot and cold water, you get a tepid water. That takes away both coldness and warmth. That's the wrong way of going about reality. And this is similar. Maybe this can help, I hope so, because this is close to the monetary thinking. Somewhat, at least. If you have 50 crowns and a debt of 50 crowns, you will have 0. You're back to the same starting point. And in the lower level where classical physics lives, all differences equals out. Just like time is bidirectional, or space is completely even, homogeneous. It doesn't matter if you just go 100 meters that way and then come back 100 meters, just same space. Thus ignoring the time difference. You cannot. What is in quantum physics is that every place is unique, like this place I'm now is unique. Probably the first time anybody had held a lecture here under this pine tree. And it's a part of the object which you can't take away. Nobody can take that away. And it's something that makes space all the same, like the money, like universalism. They say all flowers are the same from a different species. That's a sort of a general thinking. And of course this is maybe the actual implication, the implicit thinking, the implicit being in reductionism. This absolute sense, corporal sense, that everything stems from small interchangeable units. And there might be atoms, there might be whatever, meters, centimeters, seconds, directions, everything is interchangeable. I might mention here what could happen if you lose your bearing even more. If you're dreaming, this could be worse. If you're young, many people experience horrible experience in school when they sort of fathom this implicit knowledge of everything being equal. And it's scary, it's horrible, and it can only be perceived by a student if the teacher or the atmosphere has this implicit knowledge. And you can get really, really bad from it. Now this friend of mine, he was usually very grounded on the earth, but he for some reason took a hallucinogenic, an LSD pill, even took 2. And the experience started well enough, but it seemed to go in the direction of everything being the same. And then he had a stronger feeling of that everything could go backwards. And in the end, he started feeling his whole ego perspective dissolving. And this was metaphorically and literally, I think, like a television screen being turned off, the old television, where the whole picture dissolved into one little black dot and then disappeared, leaving an empty screen. Because we have this in the body when we're dreaming, when we're relaxing, or as he did, took a hallucinogenic, this can become so much stronger. And he lost his mind literally. And this is actually what's happening all worldwide now. People taking drugs to escape the boredom, and it makes it even much worse. Because we have this in our body, we need to change our habits, our knowledge, and that takes time. Knowledge is time, and we know that. So going to take drugs is possibly not very hopeful. It's almost like a last straw, completely desperate, or maybe when you've given up completely because your system knows that won't work. Well, it took him 2 years to get back into a more real world. He came back finally, but it took him 2 years. And he was constantly suffering from anxiety of not existing. And I think this goes to show that we all feel this, because we're living in the ego death era, where the eternal omnipresent observer takes the hand of our point of view, and even the most practical thing, the ahamkar, is disappearing, the one who's not very substantial. But sure enough, the atma doesn't exist today. Something continues over time. We are a million egos, not a single one that we should be. Everything is partitioned by object-subject division, inner, outer, back and forth, here and there, and now and then. And what you do, literally, I can see in front of me, he must have lost his balance corporally as well, not having an earth to stand on. That makes you full of anxiety, full of horrors, full of the most dreadful things you can experience. No, the process is implicit and explicit. It's a change both bodily and mentally. And this is definitely part of material reality. This is tangible. It's a real change. You can see it, you can perceive it. And this is important. Then you realize there are different levels. And there are certain knowledge belonging to certain levels. You can't jump from them, jump in between them. So 5, and maybe this is more of a guiding light to show people you need this directionality. You need to know there is a direction in the world. You need to understand that you now presently lack all sorts of direction. You lost at sea in a very literal way. And when you understand that, you can acknowledge the lack in your heart. And then you will know that you by yourself, if you haven't admitted it, that you have a lack within yourself, which is material, bodily, and could be mental, should be mental as well. And then you also know that there is another reality. This is not the true reality. We discover that now. We thought it was for 2,500 years. And how weird it might sound, you can actually be wrong for 2,500 years if you go into the wrong track. And it's not far from, if you go into the wrong track when you're in the woods like this, and there is no landmark, nothing, you will continue to be on the wrong track until you discover the true track. It's the same thing. I think the metaphor with the sea is even better, because you need to sort of align your compass for it to be working again. But once that's done, you're on your way, you're going in the right direction, and everything starts becoming more and more real. And halfway you can do it by yourself, because you start to learn from reality, and you start using all the implicit knowledge you already have, because you already have loads of knowledge. You just don't acknowledge it. It's just hidden. And you will be able to get new knowledge, to grow. And all those things are possible when we get balanced again, when we are on land, because this is always possible. Quantum physics shows us the possibility is always there. It's just to be taken, and you need some help on that way, definitely. Well, I think I round up from this nice woods here before the storm is coming on and I lose my way as well. Well, I thank you, good people, very much for this time, and I hope you can endure my English. Bye for now.